Hey, what's up? It's me, your old buddy Gazbot. And what are we doing today? Well, we're doing a question and answer video, but we're also doing a live drawing view of a character from the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons cartoon from the 80s named Dekkion. Now, well, it's not exactly live drawing. I recorded myself drawing, and normally I talk as I'm doing it. But this time I just recorded it, and there was other noise going on, and so I'm going to overdub that with me answering your questions and answers. Now, some of these are I've had for a while before the move, and some I just got today. So let's dig in, watch the interesting drawing of a skeleton man, and listen to the rambling crazy of a Gazbot man answering your A's.
All right, let's jump into it. You can see I have my reference on the side there. I'm working in Photoshop CS3 on my Cintiq, doing a sketcheroonie of Dekkion, the celestial slash skeletal knight from Dungeons and Dragons from the 80s cartoon. But I'm not going to be talking about that. I'm going to be answering your questions. As I said, some of these questions were kicking around for a while that I dug up, whatever, dredged and found and brought to light. And some are new as of just an hour ago. So, starting number one, Mr. Peter Palmiotti, the frozen ice king of New York, wants to know what stories can you talk about regarding with working with pets slash cats around? Well, I will answer that about cats. I know Peter also has cats, and I have three cats. And yeah, I tend to 50% of the time work with the door to my office closed for that reason. If they're getting especially, agitated, usually around like dinner time, they'll start like jumping up. It's one thing if they want to sit in my lap, but when they start doing that walking in circles on top of my keyboard, it's time to go. But right before I moved, Star Commander, the youngest and most energetic of the cats, had a tendency to jump off the windowsill and kind of go behind my desk to get to the floor. And two or three different times, she somehow managed to hit the power button on my computer and turn it off while I was in the middle of working on something, making me lose X amount of work, whether it's 5 minutes or a half hour, depending on how badly I have been at my saving. So the number one thing is keep your cats away from your power button. Also, one of my cats likes to chew wires, so a lot of the wires in my house have coverings I had to get at Lowe's, and no matter how many we cover up, there always seems to be one more that she's ready to chew on. All that being said, it is nice when they're in a good mood and calm. They'll just sort of sit on my desk or near me, and they're good little company friends, especially when I'm working alone or late at night all by myself, as artists we tend to do. Okay. The next question comes from little Alex Elkins, who I babysat for over in Tulmeridge Road. He's 8 now, but I knew him when he was 6, and he asks, what would you recommend to the new toy collector for how to display their items? Depending on how much room you have, how much money you want to invest, etc., the default thing, once you get past putting them on shelves you might mount on your wall or a bookcase or whatever, is to get a DTOF from IKEA. They go for about $60. They're glass. You can put a light in them if you want. They do keep out a lot of dust, not all dust. Some people mod them to keep the dust out. But when you're displaying toys, you want to have visibility. You want to keep dust off them as much as possible. But more important than either of those things, well, I guess visibility is most important, is keeping them away from natural sunlight. That's right. Much like my skin, it will only cause pain and damage if you get your toys in the sunlight. Before I knew this, I had many toys that I would line up on my like windowsill and like stormtroopers and things like that, and their backs all turn yellow. Some toys get discolored. Some of them you could save with like bleach and other things. Some of them you can't. Some will actually get brittle and shatter. But sunlight is the enemy of all toys. So display them somewhere you could see them. Try to keep dust off them and keep them out of the sunlight. Treat them like gremlins. Well, treat them like Mogwai, because gremlins you actually do want to burn up in the sun. Up next, we've got a bevy of questions, a veritable plethora. A cornucopia? No, not quite a cornucopia. It's a clip of four, a quadruple, a quad of questions coming from Mr. Glenn Gretzky. That last name sounds familiar. I wonder if our families are connected somehow. Anyway, he wants to know number one, what was the worst business decision you made so far, and what did you learn from it? Um, I don't know if I could think of one single worst business decision, but I've made several, several worst business decisions. I've made several bad decisions. The ones that come to mind usually revolve around not asking for enough money, not asking for enough time, undervaluing myself, and or getting in over my head on projects. Now, I'm all for saying yes to whatever it is. Can you do this? Yes. Then figure it out later, because you put the pressure on and you hopefully figure out how to do it. And if not, well, You do. I mean, if you have the drive to be in this business and do this sort of thing, you will make it work. And if you can't do that, then you shouldn't be in this business. But I'm not answering the question. So the things I've learned from the bad decisions I've made are A, to not work for free pretty much ever. If it's charity or it's family or something like that, that's a different story. But there's never a reason to work for exposure, to work for anything like that, because you could always just work on your own thing and put it out wherever you want, especially in this day and age. And anybody that has a good idea or a real thing is going to have funding to give you. Like, especially now that I've worked for bigger clients, like if it's a project that's going to go somewhere, if it's going to be something worthwhile, they're going to have bankroll for it. I did so many projects when I was younger for nothing, or for the promise of something, or for $20, or for a piece of the back end, or any of that, and that's all garbage. Get paid or work on your own thing. And if you're going to get paid, get at least a portion of it up front. Don't work on faith. And so, yeah, I've learned to be a little bit more business savvy, have some sort of contract, also with revisions and things like that. Because I got in situations where we negotiated a certain price and then things kept getting added or changed, and it took longer and longer. So, time management, contracts, and when I say contracts, I'm not a lawyer. It's like just something I write up on my email, just like, here's what you expect, here's what I expect. And if that changes, we'll have to, talk about the terms. And that just makes it so that when they're coming back with the third round of revisions, you don't have to feel awkward about wanting more money, because you had already said, hey, you get one round of revisions and then it costs more or whatever. So, um, yeah, again, I maybe I could come up with a better question, if a better answer, more specific answer, if I sat down and went through all my records of everything I've worked on in my life. But I just have a lot of memories of agreeing to do things for very little money and working my butt off, and getting nothing out of it. It went nowhere. It didn't show up anywhere, and I got $50 for like 3 full days of work or something stupid like that. And I guess aside from all the stuff I just said, the real basic lesson is, don't be flattered. Don't let flattery guide your decision making. Oh, you're such a good artist. Oh, I was honored that they asked me. That's garbage. Make your own honor. Be like a Klingon. Earn it. You know, just work on your own stuff. Study your anatomy, study perspective, study storytelling, color, light, shade. And if you don't want to do that, then put out a comic, put out an animation, draw a poster, make an album cover. Make your own work, make your own portfolio, get it out there. Don't work for free. Don't work undervalue yourself, because even if you're just out of school and a student, you're still worth more than nothing for someone else. So that's that. Okay, number two. That's that. I solved it, everybody. Number two. Have you found that content make marketing, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, boosted your business in a notable way? Any one particular work best for you? No, I have not noticed that content marketing, as you put it, has boosted my business. Although I don't think I do a very good job of it. I don't do regular updates. I have several different formats of videos and things like that. I'm scattershot with the type of art I do. I'm I do it for fun, and it does have a nominal upswing. I have a little bit of name recognition among certain groups of people on the internet, or at certain conventions or things like that, but it doesn't translate into tons of sales or fans or anything like that. There's a few more people that knew me that didn't. I may have gotten a job or two over the course of several years, but it's not like every day people are banging down my door. I've sold a few issues of the comic, I've sold a few more prints, things like that online, but I would say it equals 5% of my business, 10% of my business at most, like the amount of actual income or jobs created through that. Now, when it comes to what works and what doesn't, I could tell you Tumblr is garbage for me. I might as well be throwing stuff down a pit. Twitter is not much better. I don't. There's a few that I don't even use. I did Periscope briefly. I stopped that, and all the streaming stuff. I think it used to do better for people than it does now, and I just don't like it. I don't like the live drawing aspect, having to talk to people and read chats at the same time. It's just not my thing, and I'd much rather do a pre-recorded thing like you're hearing right now. That being said, YouTube is my favorite, second to Instagram. If I have a Facebook one, and then Facebook's okay too, but I tend to post stuff to Instagram and then repost from there, and or do YouTube. And those are my two favorite. I get the most interaction, and I'm not talking about money or jobs necessarily, although if I got any, it would be from Facebook, Instagram, Etsy, or YouTube. Those are the only four that I've ever gotten anything from. But I'm also talking about engagement, people commenting on my art, talking to me about what I'm doing, being excited to go to a convention or whatever, things like that. The feedback makes it worthwhile. But Honestly, I could quit doing all of it and it wouldn't affect my business terribly much. As long as I have an online portfolio, maybe I'd keep the Instagram, just throw stuff up and I get people to follow me and like see the hashtags. But most of the followers are not from my own personal work or from the toys I put up or anything like that. It's usually from my fan work. Like for example, here the Dekkion, like 80s cartoon groups will like it, and Dungeons and Dragons fan groups will like it, and things like that. But that doesn't mean they're going to go read my comic. That doesn't even mean they're going to go look at my Godzilla prints or even my other 80s cartoon artwork. People are very focused in on what they like. And so you're more likely to get traffic when you cater to that, but it's less likely to convert to anything useful for you other than a pat on the back for doing a cool picture of a character they like. I hope that answers that. But again, I'm not very business savvy. If I was, I would have a standard format. I'd post every Monday and it would be like, here's the request you guys wanted and here's a contest and I've tried various things like that, but I don't want it to be my business. I want to make art. I don't want to make videos or Twitters. I don't That's all stuff I do on the side. And if when push comes to shove and I'm not getting enough art done, those are the things that fall to the wayside. I'm not going to keep making videos at the expense of getting art done. I'm not going to keep posting to Instagram at the expense of getting a comic page inked or things like that. That's all secondary. That's like the little mini rewards I give myself for getting the work done. Question number 3 in this Ben Quadraneros of questions, the interrogatives deuce, dose, trace, quattro, right back to quattro, is have you thought of doing other projects that tie into what you currently do? Example, writing an ebook on the first time comic writing slash publishing. Um, Regarding the second half of that question first, no, I have no interest in writing a book, or otherwise, on comic writing or publishing or any sort of instructional text. I'm not much into teaching. I was a substitute teacher briefly. I was terrible at it. Now, granted, it wasn't art. I don't, well, I say I'm not into teaching, and I'm not into teaching. I don't mind demoing things. I don't mind showing people my art process, answering questions, giving advice, sharing the knowledge I have, as others have shared with me, and I still hope to I will be shared with in the future, the cycle of sharing, whatever. And I like the transparency of my ideas for what might make my business and my art grow. And I like watching it from other people, but the actual like teaching, not so much. I don't feel like I'm enough of an expert. I don't feel like I'm enough of a writer or have that ability to explain. I am much better at jabbering on like this, and I'm not necessarily succinct, so got a lot of things going against it. So no, I don't plan on doing anything like that. But I do have a fair number of videos that are somewhat instructional. Not so much about art. I'll talk about what I'm doing and the decisions I'm making and why, but more about doing conventions and things like that. There's a lot of like, hey, here's how I set up my thing, and hey, here's where I got my prints made and everything. But I don't see that as instructional so much as examples and guidelines and sort of how to's. I guess how to and instructional. What's the difference? I don't know. What I'm saying is no, I'm not going to write a book on that. And the but when the first half of the question led my mind somewhere else because you have thought of doing any projects that tie into what you currently do. Um, I was thinking of like the horror and the horror form a comic and the projects that I think about that all the time. I think about spin-off books or prequel books, or I would love to have like an anthology book that other artists and writers work on. And I have the standee, but I would love to have a toy. I've thought about doing t-shirts. I have buttons. I have stickers, but I've thought about doing more there too. So um, I've thought about even doing small animations and things like that, but I hold myself back from most of that because I just want to get the book done. And it's such an easy thing to get sidetracked when you're working on a project. It's like the new relationship syndrome. You always, oh, look at this new character and this new storyline. It's so great. And I designed the character and created all the side characters and the basic plot. And I drew like 3 pages and now I'm bored. I'm going to start another one. And I don't even though it's not the same, it is in the sense that it's taking me forever to get this book done, and I don't want to lose focus. And so I'm allowing small things like buttons and prints and things like that because they're not too far removed and they're not too time consuming and they do help promote the book. But other tie-ins, if they come, will come after the book is done. Um, and I don't plan on writing any other. I don't plan on writing. I wouldn't. I think it's highly unlikely I will ever write any book, like a novel, like just words, instructional or otherwise. I won't say impossible, but if I ever did, it would be much more likely to be fiction or something than an instructional book. Okay, last question. Number 4, Yonban. Are there any skills you are planning on building to help your business? Example, 3D modeling, drafting, or other non-art skills. Um, that's a good question. I probably should. Well, if I see, I'm not really pursuing animation anymore. If I was, I should learn 3D animation, and that's half the reason I don't pursue animation as much anymore because I don't like it. I'm not interested in it. I'm lazy. I'm prejudiced against it. Now, that doesn't mean I don't like Pixar and things like that, but just in terms of me wanting to do it, it seems like hard math geometry where I'd rather not I'd rather not have a job working there than yeah I'd rather have another completely unrelated art job and then just draw for fun at home if it came down to that. And I don't know if I have the head for it, and it would be like starting from ground zero or square one all over again with that specifically. But I always am looking at perspective, anatomy, storytelling, composition, bright and dark, color, all these things. If you're an artist, you're always a student, and I'm always working on upping those skills. Beyond that, I do know a lot more about computer, video editing, Photoshop, all that stuff than I ever thought I would out of necessity. I'm not, as much as I'm on the computer, I'm not a big computer person. I'm a slow adopter. Whenever there's like, hey, we need to update your whatever, it doesn't update until they force me to update it. So I could probably stand to learn a little bit more about business. Everything I've learned has just been through experience. I've never really put any effort into it beyond like some basic classes I took in college, 10 years ago or whatever it was. So, yeah, I don't know. When I think of things to help my business, as it were, it's usually projects I could do or ways to market myself as opposed to adding new skills. When I think of the skills I have, it's more about improving the skills I currently have than going into new fields. That might change eventually, but that's where I'm at right now. So, that's the end of that little block of questions that are all businessy. Let's move on and see what's next. Mike Emmerich, legal counsel to the Kent family, had an older question from a while back, and it says "perspective on the computer?" question mark. I don't know if that's the full question, or if he messed up typing it, or if I messed up copying it, and I can't find the original. So I will just say perspective is easier on the computer. I can do it without the computer using a T-square and a triangle and all that stuff, and it's basically the same thing with vanishing points. Creating buildings receding into the distance or train tracks or whatever it is you're working on. The main thing that makes it easier on the computer to me, because there's some parts that are a little bit more challenging. Like in some ways, a ruler is a little bit easier than the shift brush, thing I do in Photoshop. But the ability to have multiple layers helps because I can do the background on a separate layer from the characters. I can do the shading on the background from a separate layer from the characters. And I end up having like 15 layers when I'm doing a building in perspective. Eventually I merge them all and ink over it, but it does help to use the computer mainly for layers. So I don't know if that was the question. I don't know if I answered it, but there you go. Mikey Emmerich, legal counsel to the Kents. Okay, up next, this is a newer question. Josh Wallen, this is a gentleman that I've spoken with before, and I say Whalen. It's Wallen. I'm gonna say it's Wallen. I always forget. I'm such a jerk when it comes to stuff like that. Anyway, I he says, when will the hiatus be over, and how is the A4 horror A4 coming along to your liking? Question mark. So the hiatus they refer to, I think it was the end of September, beginning of October. I announced I was going on a hiatus from taking commissions and other client work. Sort of. I still have a few client works that I've been having to do because of previous contracts or an ongoing client that's been giving me work every once in a while for years. When they come back, I'm not going to be like, no, I can't do it right now. But I am not actively seeking out work, and I'm not taking private commissions to do pinups and original characters and things like that for people for an indefinite period, I said. And the reason for that is to focus on getting issue 2 of the Horror A4 done, which I'm very close to being done actually because of that. And so when is the hiatus going to be over? I don't know. I can say it will definitely not be over until December because the comic art won't be done until the end of November, beginning of December. So I might open up a brief window there in December in case people want to get gifts for the holidays. Don't send me requests yet because I'm not saying that officially, but at least until the end of November, I will be on hiatus. And what I might do is open it up, take some work, and then close it again once I get a certain amount filled up because I could squeeze in one or two here and there, but I was getting a lot, which is a good problem to have. I'm not complaining, but where it was. I guess that's the thing is some artists will take like 20 commissions and then do them when they have time over the course of however long, but I don't like to work that way. If I have your money and I have you on a commission, I don't want you waiting months and months and months and months if I can help it. I like to get it knocked out pretty quick, a couple weeks or whatever, and I'd much rather have one or two people give me a commission and I get them done in a few weeks, and then get a few more and get them done in a few weeks, then take 10 and have that 10th person waiting 4 months. It's not my preferred way to work. And so that's why I closed the commissions. And like I said, it's kind of a roundabout answer, but at least until the end of November, we're about the beginning, middle of November right now. Um, like I said, I might open it up briefly in December, but other than that, it'll probably be the beginning of next year in January. And how is the horror A4 coming along to your liking? Well, I sort of answered that. I'm getting really close. I'll probably do another video with a horror A4 production report update, but I am quite far along. I have all the pencils done. The lettering is pretty much done. I have a couple pages left to ink, and then I have to do the front cover, and that's it. Then I mean, I still have to lay it out and stuff, but once I get that far, I'll probably set up a Kickstarter to launch it, and then I can just do the laying out of pages and stuff while that's going, because it takes a month to go. Anyway, so I'm definitely happy with the progress I've been making since I went on hiatus, which is good news for the book, but bad news for people that want to commission me because it encourages me to take less commissions. I do still take commissions at shows, but since we're kind of at the end of con season, as of now, I'm not committed to any cons for the rest of the year. There are two possibles, but I'm not committed to them. So it's entirely possible I won't do a show again until, next spring. Okay, so that was his answer. I hope he liked it. There's no refunds. And next up, we have another question from Alex Elkins, who we talked about before. And, at age 8, he is now a 12% shareholder of Facebook. So good for him. I chalk up my tutelage to his young self for that. His second question, once again, I believe this was an older one. Do you ever use action figures as reference when drawing? Well, as far as the IRS is concerned, yes, every single one I've ever bought. No, I definitely get inspiration from them a lot, and I like having them around. And sometimes I do, yes. When it comes to, I did a Green Ranger Dragon Zord print, and I definitely looked at my Legacy Dragon Zord for that for sure. That's one tangible, specific example I could think of. I don't like what it comes in handy a lot is less organic things and more like a Sentai Power Ranger helmet if I have a toy of it that I could look around the different directions, or robots or things like that. I occasionally use other toys, but when it comes to robots, mechanical things, I imagine I would use a car, stuff like that. I do, yes, occasionally use toys as reference. But that's direct reference. But even when I'm not using direct reference, I think just having it around helps me when I'm at a convention or something and someone's like, "Hey, can you draw Deadpool?" Even though I haven't read a Deadpool comic in years, I'm like, "Well, I have a Deadpool figure in my house, so I know what Deadpool looks like." So it helps with that sort of muscle memory, visual recollection of those characters, even if I'm not directly using it. Up next, Age of Berm 96 wants to know who is my favorite character to draw. And I get this question a lot. I'm not really sure I could answer it. I feel like depending on the day or the week or the year, it's gonna change. A lot of times when it comes to like warm-up sketches and just having fun kind of stuff, it's heavily influenced by if I just saw a movie I liked, or I rewatched an old cartoon, or going back to toys if I got a new toy, or I saw a poster of something at a store. So a lot of times like characters and things like that are triggered by what is topical in my life. Might not be a new thing. Like I went to see Thor, I drew Thor. But then I also drew somebody from the old British sci-fi comedy Red Dwarf because I happen to be watching that. It's not topical for everyone else, but it's topical for me. Um, that doesn't answer the question. When I get people who commission me, usually kids or someone who wants either a free sketch, which I occasionally do for kids, or just a quick, cheap head sketch, and they say, do whatever you want. I know they usually want a superhero, and so I tend to do Nightcrawler or Booster Gold, once in a while Flash, because those are kind of my favorite superheroes. That doesn't necessarily mean they're my favorite to draw, but like I said, they're my favorite superhero, so I go to it for that. Um, I don't like drawing Godzilla. I do a lot of Godzilla artwork. I like Godzilla. I like giant monsters. He's really hard to draw. Not the main part of the body, but getting all the little skin details and ridges and everything like that just takes forever. I'm proud when I finished it and I like the effect, but it's not definitely not fun to draw. Similarly, Ultraman and a lot of Sentai heroes getting the specific lines on their helmets and costumes because they're all different and specific is a little bit meticulous, so that would not be a favorite either. Um, when left to my own devices, I don't know that there's a favorite character. I tend to draw robots and monsters, but not a specific robot or monster. Just doodling a robot that I'm making up as I'm drawing it, or a monster, or a zombie, or whatever, a kaiju, whatever, but not based on anything specific. Not even my own characters. Because again, like if I do the horror A4, it's similar to Godzilla, not particularly fun to draw. The layouts are fun and like getting the pose right, but when it goes in to do all the little detail work and stuff, it's tedious. So it's satisfying and I like the effect, but it's not fun to draw. So I'm really not answering your question. Let me think if I could think if I had to draw a character right now. Let's do that. I'm looking at like on the screen here is Dekkion. He was fun to draw, and so for today, this morning, that was the character I most wanted to draw. Um, I don't know. I When I do caricatures, sometimes I like drawing Jedis and things like that, but that's usually someone else's head on top of a Jedi body, so it's not like I'm drawing Luke or Anakin or something. Favorite character to draw. I wonder if there's a way to figure out what character I've drawn more than any other. I feel like I've drawn Wolverine a lot. Never for like really finished art, but just doodling Wolverine. But he's not my favorite character to draw. I think it's just something that I did when I was younger and I still do. Um, yeah, I'm sorry I'm not answering this question well. I was just commenting to Q on how I wasn't really answering this question, and I haven't really been answering a lot of these questions. And some of them are pretty straightforward, like who's your favorite character to draw? And I I apologize that basically what I've been doing is I get a question, and then I spend 5 minutes explaining why I can't really answer it. But I don't want to lie or be disingenuous. I mean, like the easy answer would be like, Nightcrawler. But like, I don't feel like drawing Nightcrawler right now. I probably won't do him for a warm up tomorrow. So is he really my favorite? It seems like my favorite character to draw is, again, whatever I feel like at that moment. Some characters I like drawing better than others, obviously. But if my warm up sketches are any indication, I've been doing warm up sketches every day ish for the last couple weeks, and it's been something completely different each time. So, uh, yeah, there's your non-answer answer. So I apologize for that. Moving on, Dan Thulu, what gives you consistent inspiration? Well, hey, Dan Thulu, get ready to have another non-answer to your question. Uh, I really, if I was just a liar or kept it more surface level, I could just be like, good art gives me inspiration, but that's just not true. Um, I watch television, live action as well as animation. I read comics. I collect toys. I occasionally play video games, although not as much as I used to. Um, all of these things inspire me to a certain extent. Um, and I kind of keep my mind and my imagination active and keep me sort of childish and interested in creating the things that I enjoyed since I was a kid and continue to enjoy to this day in various ways. Um, so in that sense, there's the inspiration to just sort of be young and creative of mind. But if it's something's too, like I definitely have a love-hate relationship. Like years ago when I saw The Incredibles on the Pixar movie, it blew my mind, and I was like, "This is amazing! It's one of the best animated movies I've ever seen. It's one of the best superhero movies I've ever seen." Because again, this is before the millions of superhero movies we have now, and I'm like, I wish I made this movie. It's so good. It's so good. I love it. And I was like, I want to quit art and never. It's like when something's so good, it inspires me to quit because I'm like, I'll never do this. And so it's when I look at like Arthur Adams is a comic artist I like a lot. Primarily famous from the 80s, but he still works today doing Marvel and other stuff. He does monsters and he does, robots and aliens as well as superheroes and a lot of the stuff I would like to do in a style I very much admire. But it's when I look at his work, it's depressing and disheartening. Like, I don't know if I could ever do that. So I'm inspired to create to add to the lexicon of things in our world that would inspire others or entertain others or allow escapism for others, as they did for me at one point and still do, as I said. Um, but if I see somebody doing superior, excellent work, it's a very double-edged sword where it inspires me to keep creating, but I also am like, I'm never going to do what they're doing. And I know, everybody has their own special style, blah, 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 blah. But, some people are just objectively amazing. And if I work, I'm never going to get there. If I was going to get there, I would have been there by now to that level. You know what I mean? It's a certain amount, like, certainly we could all improve and refine our skill and blah, 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 blah. But, I would have, yeah, it's just, so what inspires me? Well, here's the caveat. What gives you consistent inspiration? Because these things do inspire me. I might see, you know what inspires me sometimes is like I'll see a character that I think is stupid or ugly looking, like Aquaman. I think he has a terrible costume and he's not a particularly interesting character to me. And then I'll read a comic where somebody makes him interesting, and I'll go, wow, that's pretty inspiring. You could take a crap character and do that, and they change his costume a little bit by giving him a high collar and like change a few things around. And I'm not talking about when they revamped him in the '90s and cut his hand off and make but it still looks like classic Aquaman. But because they were able to draw the scales so they look metallic and shiny and gave him a higher collar and did just little artistic changes made him look really cool. And then writing wise, rather than focus on him talking to to fish and jumping in and out of water, it's all about running a kingdom or the betrayal of his people or something like that. So suddenly a good writer or artist has taken something that is I want to say objectively crap, but that's a subjective term, but less popular or corny by the average person's viewpoint, and turns it around and makes it cool. That is inspiring to me. It's also similarly like I like Godzilla, but most Godzilla comics are not that great. And I read a really good one I talk about a lot called Half Century War, which was 5 issues, written and drawn by James Stokoe. I'm getting his name wrong. He's doing an Aliens book now. He's done a bunch of stuff, and it was great. And the art was cool and evocative, but still kind of cartoony. And it told this, you know, for Godzilla deep story, and that inspired me. Seeing people put a new twist on old things, I think inspires me because that's a lot of what I aspire to do. I'm not looking to reinvent the wheel. I'm looking to just improve the wheel and keep it going and give us all a ride to a fun time. Yeah. So consistent inspiration. I don't know, but yeah, actually, you know what else? Here's what gives me consistent inspiration: being bored. I was never more creative, optimistic, and productive than when I was in high school or when I was working my retail jobs, when I would just have hours to kill sitting there bored out of my mind, and I'd escape into my mind and create characters and situations and things like that and doodle them on napkins. And so while I don't have that kind of free time now, if I go for a walk or even if I'm just, I don't know, waiting online or anytime I find myself really bored, if I could manage to not look at my phone and sit in my head and be bored, like shower, they talk about showers being good for that, and I agree with that. So consistent inspiration is boredom. That's that's my consistent inspiration. Okay, I kind of answered that one. All right. Look at this. Another one from Mr. Alex Elkins, 12% shareholder of Facebook at age 8. And he says, what is your favorite thing to watch after a long day working on the Horror A4? Um, well, I am married to my wife Q, and we watch a lot of television together. That's a big part of like our together time. We have dinner, we watch some TV, and maybe watch a movie, whatever. So a lot of it is dictated by what we're watching together, which is a lot of shows, and we tend to catch up on whatever's new on Hulu and then Netflix, and then kind of go into our backlog of stuff. So it's more about spending time with her and watching whatever shows we're catching up on. If I'm by myself, um, I do like watching Power Rangers or Super Sentai, something kind of mindless and fun. But I also really like watching documentaries on almost anything. Even if it's something that doesn't interest me, like if it's a well-made documentary, it fascinates me. So I mean, there's a million things in between I like to watch too, and I have favorite shows, obviously. Like I love Doctor Who, but Doctor Who isn't always available. They seem to put out like 12 episodes every 2 years at this point. So, you know, on a given day, if I was like on a desert island and they were like, okay, well, you're gonna get an episode of Power Rangers or Super Sentai or Ultraman, and then you're gonna get a documentary on how shoes are made, and then you're gonna get an episode of Power Rangers again, and a documentary on the financial crisis of National Baseball League back in the 50s. And like, okay, that sounds good. That sounds good. Something kind of heavy and dense, and then something kind of frivolous and visually interesting, and then a wall of people talking about numbers and facts, and then some explody stuff. Sounds good. All right, we're coming to the end of the list now. Samurai Ox has asked, given the opportunity, which artist's portfolio of their earliest artwork, professional and paid, first 3 years would you most like to see? Um, that's interesting because a lot of artists nowadays publish books with that sort of thing, or you can find it online. Now, I understand that might not be completely, a full catalog of everything that was in their portfolio for those years, but like, just as an example, and this not even that he would have been my pick, but Todd McFarlane is an artist who was a favorite of mine as a kid, and while his art style is not as much of a favorite of me now, I still very much find him an interesting person, and I have a book on him and his art and it has art from when he was a kid all the way up to what was then modern day. So even if he was my choice, I wouldn't pick it because that's like that thing of hey, if you could see any rock star living or dead, who would you see? I wouldn't be like, oh, Eddie Vedder from Pearl Jam because he's still alive. Also, that wouldn't be my pick, but I was just like, Kurt Cobain from Nirvana, well, he's dead, so that would be a thing to go see, but you don't want to waste that wish on something that you could use it on. So I'd have to think of an artist that I like, that work is difficult to come by, unless I'm misunderstanding the question, but I think I'm understanding it. That it's sort of early professional work, but complete works, a lot of stuff that wouldn't be reproduced because it'd just be package design or some one-off T-shirt for a little league thing or whatever. Um, I maybe Drew Struzan, which is a weird choice considering I'm mostly a comic storyteller, artist kind of appreciator, but one of the few artists that I like that isn't that sort of artist is Drew Struzan, the poster artist, who does a compared to what I do, a very realistic style, although he has his own flair on it. And he's mostly known for doing posters. And if you've seen any major poster from the 80s or 90s, he's probably worked on it. Star Wars, Indiana Jones, all that stuff. Um, and I have two books of his artwork, but most of it is poster work. And I guess I'd be interested to see some of his earlier work before he was the guy doing posters. I know a lot of that artwork is lost as like packaging and things like that. But I don't know if that's my top pick. See, I don't prepare for these, by the way, in case that's not clear. I read them and then just go. If I was smart, I'd like think about it, do some research, hit you with some real answers, but I'm trying to keep it conversational. So he's the one that comes to me off the top of my head. I'm probably going to get done with this and be like, what are you, crazy? What about this guy and that guy? Maybe Jim Lee. Jim Lee is not a favorite of mine. And basically around the time he got his own X-Men book is when I kind of stopped really liking his work. Now, don't attack me. He's obviously a very skilled artist. He's prolific as heck. He's popular. I have nothing against him. He seems like a real nice guy. But I preferred his earlier work, which I know sounds weird. I've talked about this before. It was a little less polished, a little less samey, and so I'd be curious to see what he did before like Alpha Flight for Marvel, if he was doing other artwork. So that's the other thing. A lot of the artists I like might not have had professional work before the professional work I'm aware of. Those two come to mind. Uh, maybe somebody like a Jack Kirby or a Steve Ditko who has such a distinctive style, and but I haven't seen any of Jack Kirby's work pre-comics. Like he must have been doing some kind of commercial art or something, but I can't imagine he was doing that blocky, Fantastic Four style. That'd be interesting to see. But again, that's not like my top dream pick. Yeah, I'm sorry, I've kind of half answered your question there, Ox. All right, so I think the next question will probably be our last one. I think I've gotten through most of the old ones, and I think I hit all the new ones. Some people gave me multiple questions, and I didn't answer every single one of their questions, but I at least represented everybody that asked a question, I believe. If I didn't, I apologize. Feel free to let me know, and maybe you could be getting a question answer in the next one. Also, it's funny because this quote unquote warm up sketch I did today ended up being more of a finished piece of art, and it was close to an hour. So I was thinking that I'd probably have to speed it up, but you're watching it real time, and we're not too far from the end. So the final question by Oki-chan195 is, what was your first paid comic related gig? How did you come upon that opportunity? My first paid, oh, yeah, okay, see, so my first paid gig, I can remember like for sure. Well, actually, no. Okay, this is about my first paid comic related gig, but I was thinking of my first paid art gig. Even though that wasn't the question, I'm just gonna quick touch upon that. I had two jobs in high school. I'm forgetting which came first, but one was I was hired by my math teacher to draw a, a portrait, a cartoon of a student who had died, who I didn't know, who was on the golf team, and I guess he was the captain of the golf team, so he hired me to draw this kid basically playing golf in heaven, like on a cloud, and I did that. I don't think I did a very good job. I think I did an okay job of making it look like a comic book style person swinging a golf club on a cloud. I don't think it was great because I never played golf. I don't even know if I had reference. At that time, I probably just tried to draw it out of my head, having only played mini golf. And I think he gave me a photo of the kid, but I couldn't zoom in on it. And and I think I got like 10 or 15 bucks. And I think it was a combination of him wanting to do something nice for the family and him wanting to do something nice for the kid that couldn't pay attention in class and wouldn't shut up, but it drew all the time. So there's that. Mr. Nodal was his name, by the way. So I do appreciate that from him. And the other one was self-inflicted, self-obtained. Oh, I used to work at Hobby Masters, which is a hobby store in Red Bank, New Jersey, and they had the Dungeons and Dragons and role playing section, and I got the idea that I could draw people's characters. And if you've ever played character sheets, it's kind of like the nowadays in video games, you pick the race and the hair and the height and the gauntlets and whatever, and you could do it, but you couldn't really do it back then except on paper. So I got the idea that, oh, well, they would say that they're like a half elf cleric that's 37 years old, female with red hair and dark skin with a +2 vorpal blade and a shield of holding, and like, and so I would take their character and draw it, and I think it was like $20 or $30. I said I would do like a full character inked in color, and I put up this little flyer on the bulletin board, which is mostly like people wanting to buy and sell models or join a group or whatever. And but I worked there, and the owners let me do it. And the only response I got was from the owner's daughter, which was nice. And I don't know if I ever asked this, but I strongly suspect that the owners gave her the money and were like, oh, why don't you get your think similar to the teacher, like, oh, we'll help our kid get her a piece of art and help this kid that works for us let him get an art job. And I did a better job on that than I did on the kid playing golf because I actually did have an interest in fantasy, role playing games and stuff. But it was a female character, and at that time I still struggled to draw females, so I'm sure it wasn't amazing, but it was still better than the other one, and I probably spent hours on it. That wasn't the question though. The question was, what was my first paid comic related gig? Now, arguably, the Dungeons and Dragons character was comic related in the sense that I did it in a very comic book style, but that is not strictly speaking true. So let me think. I got paid to do some books for Rubicon Publishing for Scholastic, but I did comic work before that was paid. My buddy Dave had a comic called Eep, and he paid me to pencil a story in that. And we were roommates and friends, so that's how I got that job. But that wasn't my first one either. I had a comic strip in the Daily Targum, which was a Rutgers newspaper for a while, that I got paid for. Comic related. I mean, this comic related. Is that my first paid comic work? That might be my first paid comic work, and I got that. My friend Mike Dawson had a comic strip in the paper at the time, and I think I was just like, how do you get a strip? And he's like, here's the name of my editor, and I went to the editor and I was like, how do you get a strip? And they're like, come back with like, I want to say like a week's worth of strips, which would have been 5, and the basic idea. And I'm like, here's the idea, and here's my 5 strips. And they're like, okay, you're hired. And I got like something like $5 or $7 a strip, so that for a week, and I got paid every 2 weeks. So I think it was $7, so I had 35, so it would be like $70 every 2 weeks. But then after taxes, it was like $60. And it was not worth the money I was getting paid was sort of like acknowledging I was doing work and giving me money, but it was not nearly worth the effort I was putting in. But it was good training because I was working every single day for a couple of years, not including weekends. Very often I'd be super late and like running to not even to my editor, but I'd have to like go to where they put them on the scanner or the printer, because like I have to have it to my editor by 5. But if I missed that, then I had to have it to like the place where they actually print it by 7. And that did happen a few times, but I don't think I ever actually blew a deadline that I could remember. At least without giving them notice and saying, hey, I'm not going to be able to do this because I'm going away or whatever. But as little as it was, that money, I was so broke at the time that sometimes I'd be dying to get that $62 check. Was that my first comic related work? And it was, it was a comedy strip, but it was still had some action, and I still drew in a style that was probably a little bit more detailed than it should be for the type of work it was. Um, I think that might be my first. I mean, I also around that time was doing caricatures at a theme park, which also isn't comic related. Um, I printed my own comic fanzines where they were like photocopied, 8.5 by 11, like 11 by 17 folded in half, with the aforementioned Mike Dawson, my friend Neil Shaw, a couple other people, and then I did a few by myself, which was comics that I technically got paid for, but it was like I was hiring myself, printing them myself, and then trying to sell them for $1, $2, $3, whatever. So like maybe I made like $50 after I sold all of them or something, you know. Again, technically that would be my first comic book related gig, and then I collected the strips that I did into books similarly, where they 8.5 by 11 because they were folded in half, 11 by 17 photocopies. And I actually went to SPX in Maryland, was the Small Press Expo, was the first Comic Con I ever did. Um, and it was a thing where I think I remember feeling like I made money because maybe I, walked out of there with like $40 in my pocket, but like the table had cost 100 and there was a hotel room and like I definitely lost money, but I had spent that money before. Um, yeah, I just remember a little smattering here and there. I got hired to do a comic called Bunko Man, which was about like insurance adjustments and things like that. But that was after EAP too. The first couple jobs I had, I guess, were either me hiring myself and just trying to make money off something I created, or through a friend or someone I knew giving me work. That's how I got my early work in all those, in most of those cases I just said. So, not a super exciting answer, but hopefully, that's good enough. What do we? Hopefully that's good enough. Let me see if I have another question. That is a really good question, but I just didn't have a strong answer. I feel like when I see like people on panels, it's like, oh, how did you get your first job? And it's like, well, what I did was I was walked into Macy's and said, hey, Mr. Macy's, here's my thing, and then he didn't like it, but his wife did, and then I got that job, and like there's some big story, but like a lot of my early work was kind of meh work. It was like a small little job that I might have even forgotten I had at this point because I made next to no money, and it didn't lead to my career. It was like I would do that job and then continue working at the video store for the next 2 years and then get another little job and then work at Kmart or Bradley's or something. So it was years of getting random occasion art jobs in between my real jobs until eventually I started making enough money that became my job. But there was never like a big break moment in anything. To this day, still. Okay, the real, actual, final last question will go once again to little Alex Elkins, the 8-year-old tycoon of Facebook. And he says, what is your favorite local, semi-local toy shop? Not comic shop, but toy shop. And this is because he knows I am a toy collector, as well as everything else that I am as a person. I'm multifaceted, people. Um, I like going to Target. I like going to Toys R Us. I like going to places like that where they have toys, and I go to them fairly regularly, but they're not my favorite. There's a bunch of comic stores around here and some vintage toy shops around here. There's uh, Toy Safari in Alameda, and then there's Kimono My House, which I like a lot as well. But both of those are. It's hard. I guess I like going to Kimono House, but Kimono House was amazing the first couple times I went there. It's this weird little store. It used to be a much bigger deal, but it's only open 1 or 2 days a week. It's out of this like warehouse, and it feels like this secret club, and it's all Japanese toys and posters and stuff. Most of it from like the 80s and 90s, and it's great, but they don't get new stock a lot. So I go there every couple months and maybe they have 1 or 2 new things. So the first time I went there, I was like, this is the best store I've ever been to. Since then, it's kind of diminishing returns. Toy Safari, I like going to and looking. They have a lot of cool vintage stuff, but their prices are not amazing. And every 5 trips there, maybe I'll get one thing. So I don't know that I have a favorite toy store at all. I mean, in terms of numbers, I go to Target the most, but that's because I can go food shopping and I can pick up some batteries and then also shop for toys while I'm there. My favorite toy store really is like a flea market, a good flea market where I could spend an hour or two walking around and actually get some good deals on some old figures or something like that. And for me, it's the thrill of the unknown, the unexpected. I love surprises in all things, and so there's nothing better. If I know there's going to be a certain toy I want at a store, that's cool, and I go there and I get it, and that's great. But it's way more exciting for me to go to a flea market and oh my gosh, look what they have. I had no idea. And oh, it's a good price. Ah, it's missing a gun. Who cares? Or toy stores in other cities or states that I've never been to. When I went and did G Fest, the Godzilla Festival in Chicago, Illinois, year before last, I stayed with my buddy Kyle, and he took me to a little shop there, which I'm now blanking on the name of, and it was great because it was like I don't know what they have, I don't know what their prices are, I don't know if they have stuff I like. Sometimes you find toys. It's also equally fun to find a toy that you've never heard of but you love. It's not part of a line you even know. It's just like some cool looking robot horse thing. I don't even know what it is, but I love it. or even better, a toy that you forgot from your childhood that you're reintroduced to, and like it unlocks like a hidden memory that you didn't even know you had. But again, that toy store I'm thinking of, that was a lot of fun to go there. And if I go back there again, I bet you it'll be a lot of the same stuff and it won't be as exciting. So my favorite toy store to go to is a new toy store. Now that doesn't mean that doesn't answer the local semi-local toy shop. So I guess for that it would probably be Toy Safari, but I'd much rather go to a flea market. All right, so that is the end. I have a little bit more time here on the video, and I think what I'm going to do is go ahead and speed it up real quick. There we go. Now we're going. I said I'm going to speed it up, but I was so just little, fiddling with little details at this point that it still looks like I'm not getting anything done. But I thank everybody for the questions that you've given me. Again, I hope I've answered them all satisfactorily. If not, I answered them to the best of my ability. I tried to be honest. I tried to be thorough. I understand some of them may be less than satisfying. If you need more clarification, feel free to ask in the comments or ask next time I look for some questions. If the questions like, what's your favorite character to draw? Ox, what's yours? Feel free to give me your answers too. Maybe you could come up with a better answer than I could or more straightforward. Yeah, and so I don't know when I'll do this again. I do these every now and then, but I thought it would be a good opportunity to do it since the sound on this wasn't really working for me, and I filled it with questions and answers.
So there's that. I don't know how long this video was. I may or may not have sped up the footage to match my question answering face noises, but hopefully you got something out of it, made your drive a little easier, listen to me jabber on while you drew, or whatever. And anyway, there'll always be more videos coming. Sometimes they'll be about art, sometimes they'll be about toys, sometimes they'll be about cats, but all times they'll star me. Gazbot! I'm a star! No, that's... no.